you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Dabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.
Welcome to Second Take with IDK. I hope you are as excited as I am for another week of brilliant analysis, expert opinions, and maybe conventional or non-conventional opinions. But yeah, we are glad you could join us this week. Remember to share, like, subscribe, do send your questions in. We shall be reading some of them, and the man himself is here. IDK. I was telling someone about it and they're like, I don't know. I said, no, it also means I do know. Hello, Isma.
Hello, Mabel. Glad to be here to start yet another week.
Another week, yeah. And for us in Uganda, we have a big event happening, the swearing in, but we will keep it only sport, and hopefully we won't be disrupted with the Sukhoi. I actually read about them after we did that short clip the other day. As usual, I'll start with some of our messages because I think they're quite interesting. Waswa Crispus says, the most stable league in the world, EPL, are adopting this women football thing. Here we can't even pay the men's side. We can't support the academy systems on the very teams, just adding a burden to football clubs. But I think FIFA should focus on financial stability for clubs before discussing anything else. That's from Waswa Crispus. We have Derek Mubiru watching from Minnesota and a Liverpool fan. He and of course Minnesota Timberwolves here waiting for game 2. I think that one could have come a bit later. Then Apollo Mukua says, Mebo, I love you so much. I'm okay with your English because my parents paid for it in my school. I hope I could invite you to New York. Well, World Cup is coming. If my boss here, Isma, can, I hope to be in the US, God willing, in July. I hope I could invite you to New York. Isma is my OB across from Iganga, Chibuli, and Makerere. I think you were in Micho. Were you in Micho?
Yeah, I was in Micho.
I don't know if he was in Micho as well. We used to watch and hear him back then as I was a young boy. Isma, inkwenda ino, omwise mena muna. Love you, Mebo and Isma. We have Musa who says, I am back here. Arsenal are winning the league and it will be a great final in Budapest. That is from Musa Mutebi. Joseph Serugunda says, I love your English, guys. Thank you very much. Tushabe says, thank you for the show. Love the energy balance. Can't wait for Budapest Day when Arsenal will be crowned champions. Greetings from Ottawa. And any news from Mukwano Gwama Anji Express? He's an Express FC supporter. I think we'll talk about that later. And Samuel says, thanks for the professional analysis. Mugendere awa mikwano. I don't know.
Mugendere awa mikwano.
Oh, okay. And then Kasozi Yusuf, who says, I appreciate your show today and perhaps the shout-outs, but me, I believe Arsenal will play Bayern Munich in Budapest. Prove me wrong the next time we are here, and I think it is PSG. But let us start with Arsenal. Lots of Arsenal fans. I happened to be in the Mutungo area yesterday. People talk about noise. And I was in a meeting and there was a lot of noise in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, of course some people were on their phones and they were like, oh yeah, they have now equalized, they have not equalized. And at the end, they actually spent so much time talking about VAR. Now, yeah. Ismail, I've known you and I usually refer to some of the conversations we have had. You have said, okay, I'm exaggerating, but that VAR is the death of football. Arsenal, West Ham, let's start from there.
I have friends who have very, very extreme opinions about VAR, especially because it still allows room for subjectivity. Because the ref then still has to decide, because I've had people, I can reference 2 of them. One of those I talk to every single day of my life, Abdul Nasser Mugabi. We sit adjacent to each other at Daily Monitor. and the other is my friend Maxali. They've always argued that when football went the route of technology, they should have left only the decisions that allow for technology to help make opinions. That's goal line technology, offside, those kind of things that then do not require an opinion of a human being, because in the end, the opinion of a human being is going to be subjective. When you're going to review penalties and handballs and fouls inside the box, still you're going to have a review of a video, then let a human being make an opinion of that. I'm one of those who, in the early days, I felt VAR was wrong to have been introduced into sport. But over time, I warmed up to it, and I'm now on the other side.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm now on the other side. I think VAR is very welcome. After all, I'd seen it do a fantastic job in tennis and in rugby. However, the video assistant referee they are using in those other sports is entirely about the decision of technology, not an opinion of a human being in the aftermath of using technology. What we saw in the game between West Ham and Arsenal is a reminder of when technology can be very good to make decisions, because there is a clear foul on David Raya. However, when the referee does not give it, I think Chris Kavanagh, who was a referee in the game, when the referee does not give it, then he needs video to alter his own opinion, not the opinion of technology. Then there is a challenge in there. I've even had people who say it takes too much time to make a decision, that the lull between the call, the initial call and the review before a decision is reached is very long. And my argument to those is always one: I would rather take as much time to arrive at a right decision than hurry and make a wrong decision. Because in the end, Olagawa, where are you going?
You have to cut a train.
In the end,
they need a train.
In the end, when you go to a football game or a sports game, any sport, you've given up 3 hours of your life. And football fans have no single excuse to say that the decision took too long. After all, we watch games that end 0-0 and even watch extra time and a penalty shootout and celebrations, and then thereafter even formulate our own opinions about the game and even get involved in an argument. So we go to a game that would have ordinarily lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes in all, including the half time, and we end up returning to our other routines after 4 hours. So I never buy the excuse of any sports fan who says they take too much time to reach it over Doragawa. You're going nowhere. You're still going to watch the game to its logical conclusion. But in the end, that could be the game that won Arsenal the league after 22 years. It could also be the most talked about VAR decision of all time, especially knowing the team that was involved, the Arsenal, who have a huge following globally and have been very, very desperate to get back to the winner's circle. So it's going to be one of the most discussed VAR decision ever. Yet I've seen some. I remember one in the season where Tottenham got to the Champions League final. I think it should be 2019. The Raheem Sterling goal against Tottenham, where Pep Guardiola runs across the touchline to celebrate. Then nearly 3 minutes later, there is a review, and then it's ruled that Raheem Sterling's toe, was offside. I think there was also Sergio Aguero involved in the build-up of that. Then it's called back, and then Man City were going through. Then after the review, Tottenham were going through and eventually reached the final. So, but that may not even get people's memories and tongues and minds talking as much as this one. What a decision, what a moment. Every Arsenal fan will look back and say that is the moment when they won the league. A game that also had that big save by David Raya.
I wanted to talk about that.
Right before Arsenal got their goal. And then you could almost sense the joy, and then the relief. When I already say Arsenal and Arsene Wenger really Bartuloga. When Mikel Arteta walks out for that post-match interview, he's asked about whether his opinion of referees has changed, because he's had very, very strong anti-referee opinions, and he goes on to hail the referees as brave. Yeah, he used the word brave for having made that decision. And sometimes, maybe this is a reminder for all sports fans or football fans, that over time, the more sports you watch, the less I think you have an extreme opinion about things, because over time, decisions will go for you and will go against you. However, because sports fans are too selfish for their memories to think beyond their last meal or their last decision, is that they never remember a decision that was given for them. They always remember those that were given against them. Let me give you a basic. The referee who disallows the West Ham goal, that would mean probably £200 million in revenue that West Ham would lose if eventually they get relegated, is the same referee that sent off Declan Rice last season when he kicked the ball away in a time-wasting gimmick. I think it was a game against Bournemouth at the Emirates, which eventually Arsenal did not win. Is that same referee? So it's very simple, very simple and very simplistic. Actually, the right word is simplistic. It's very simplistic when you find a football fan saying that referee hates us because he sent off Declan Rice. Because our memories are very short, they're a bit like goldfish or children. Yeah, we forget within seconds. Is that the same referee comes back and gives a decision, a huge decision, that means that Arsenal could win the league for the first time in 22 years, but also could mean that West Ham get relegated and lose over £200 million in revenue over a single season. Then you cannot say this referee loves us or hates us. I think in the end, yes, they will make mistakes. Yes, they'll get some decisions wrong and right. But in the end, the overriding feeling for me is that over time, you get some decisions for you and some against you.
So do they balance out? Because I've heard you talk about this.
In the end, they may never balance out. Because how do you explain what can balance out for West Ham?
200 million
if they get relegated. Yeah?
Oh.
Their books will be less by 220 million pounds. They have a stadium that seats 62,500 fans every week. In the championship, they'll do very well to sit 20,000 a week consistently when they get relegated. So how then do you even make an argument that this referee is for us or against us? It never, yes, they may never even out. I don't think the decision will even out over a period of time. But this is the use of technology. Was it a foul on Raya? Yes, it was a foul. Does it apply to someone like me who was going to the stadium in 1991 to watch Majid Musisi? It's obnoxious to me, yeah, that it's that way. But the game keeps evolving, and the more you evolve now, people will say when there was a technology, many more foul, decision shouldn't be given. In the end, you live in the moment. It's given for you. It's given against you. Arsenal win the game 1-0. Most critical moment of the season.
Let's talk about Declan Rice and Arteta's choice. Do you think, I've heard some people say that, Arteta could have blundered, made a mistake there in positioning him?
Yeah, I thought it was a very bad decision, but we all maybe have the benefit of hindsight. But let me put it this way. When Ben White gets injured and Mikel Arteta decides to make a substitution that brings on Martin Zubimendi into midfield and then moves Declan Rice to right back, Arsenal were a bit shaky or unhinged. There was clearly no balance with the side because you're moving one of your better players from a decision where he operates at his peak. I've always had an issue of managers trying to innovate, especially things that take away the best abilities of players. I've had issues in the past with Pep Guardiola, to start with. there was a time when I felt Yaya Toure was playing some of his best football at Barcelona in midfield. What does Pep Guardiola do? He moves him into defense. Eventually, he did okay. But Amore is one of those who thinks that a coach's job, primary job, is to ensure that the players have the best versions of themselves in a game. And that best version of themselves sometimes is them playing in their natural positions. That is one. Two, there used to be this former Spanish midfielder and eventually defender. I hope our producer will remember him. He used to play at Bilbao and refused to join Barcelona and eventually went to Bayern Munich. By the time he came out of Bilbao, he was one of the best defensive midfielders. Oh my God. Martinez, what is the second name? The second name, but someone watching the show will remember. Martinez used to be at Bilbao, then went to Barcelona. Then Guardiola turned him into a centre-back. I didn't agree with that. Then Pep Guardiola goes on to move David Alaba, at the time when he was one of the best left-backs in the world, and moves him into midfield. Yes, it worked for Alaba and Austria, but I don't think it worked for Bayern Munich because we are losing one of their better players. So I've sensed this over a period of time, and actually this season, I've had issues and extreme opinions about Ancelotti and moving Dominic Szoboszlai from his natural position in the center of the midfield to right back. You can do that maybe with some of your lesser players, but you do not move one of the players of the spine of the team, one of your best players, out of from a position where they help the team the most because you have a gap to fill. Luckily for Arteta is that in the moment that he moves Arteta, they did not that he moves Declan Rice, they did not lose the game. And eventually he solves that by playing Mosquera. Eventually brought on Mosquera and plays him at right back and moves Declan Rice back into midfield. And the team gets a little bit more balanced. So I've seen this with so many coaches, even Jurgen Klopp. The son where Liverpool was struggling and eventually needed an Alisson Becker header on the final day against West Bromwich Albion to get into the Champions League. There's a phase of the season where they didn't have defenders, so he chose to play Fabinho and Henderson at centre-back. And Liverpool struggled with that. Eventually, he did move, he did play Nat Phillips and Rhys Williams at centre-back, and the team found a lot more balance, even if Phillips and Rhys Williams were very young. The time when Virgil van Dijk was away with injury, missed an entire season, I think, after that injury against Everton. So, over time, I've seen many coaches, and Arteta is not the first, to make that decision where you move your spine player and promise you it never works out. It never works out over a period of time.
Well, thankfully, they didn't lose the game, as you said.
In that phase.
Yes.
Because it's very possible for them to have lost the game in that phase. Luckily, they don't lose the game. Then eventually they can manage it, and then he corrects it and brings on Mosquera, and eventually they get the goal and take a lead. Beautiful pass from Martin Odegaard to set up Leandro Trossard, who was scoring his first game in 26 outings. His first goal in 2026. He's been one of Arsenal's better players when he first moved there from Brighton, but this one has not been one of his good ones. I think Leandro Trossard, but eventually he was on the mark for that, and Arsenal go on and win the game. But eventually, a game that will be remembered for everything VAR and not the football.
Indeed. Let's talk about United, Villa, Liverpool, the top five. Well, I've skipped City because, they
are not in this race.
Yeah. But this weekend, no one really made any great strides.
Okay, United had already qualified for Europe the previous week by beating Liverpool. So maybe their season has shut down and players have gone on holiday. And they looked very poor for long periods against Sunderland. Eventually put it together for periods in the second half, but that wasn't sufficient. In the end, it was going to be very difficult to beat Sunderland at home. However, there's something I did mention on this show many weeks back, and sometimes I'm one of those who never or hardly forget sporting opinions. I can forget many things, but many things I say about sport 10 years ago, I would remember if you accuse me that I said something different. But there's something I mentioned that these teams are going to stumble over the line. They are going to run out of games for them to lose, yeah, for them to give up their Champions League aspirations, and in the end, they have to be in Europe. So I think that's what is happening. The teams are stumbling over the line. They are just stumbling over the line. United have already done it. Liverpool are very lucky now that the teams that are pursuing them are not winning games, because I thought Villa too were very poor in their 2-2 draw against the relegated Burnley. Went a goal down, came back, won, led by 2-1, but eventually were pegged back by Burnley before the game ended 2-2. Then you look at Liverpool, terrible performance against Chelsea. I think Liverpool should have a clip from this season that is adopted by Hollywood into that movie of Batman and Robin. Yeah, when you steal from the rich and give to the poor. Because they've been really gifting points to teams. This was a Chelsea team that had lost 6 in a row. And then Liverpool take the lead, but somehow then fall off and give Chelsea a route back into the game, and then concede that equalizer to Enzo Fernandez. And then thereafter, there wasn't this thing about intensity and fighting for the result and the Anfield crowd. And in the end, there were even boos from Anfield. It's a very rare thing when Liverpool fans go against their team. Actually, it's very difficult to find cases where the fans have gone against their team, to the extent that you have to go back to 2015 when Roy Hodgson was in charge in his final days as manager at Liverpool, that Liverpool fans have gone against their team. And that feeling, I think, for Arne Slot, even if after the game, he goes on to tell people that there's going to be many changes next season, there are many people there who are questioning whether is it going to be there next season, because that Liverpool side, not only did they gift Tottenham points the other time when Igor Tudor was still in charge, now they gift a coach without even a proper coaching license, yeah, Callum McFarlane at Chelsea, and they gift him a point. It's very, very difficult times. But now Liverpool have that game against Villa, at Aston Villa, at Villa Park, that comes up on Friday. You get the feeling that
a must win for either.
But maybe regardless, Villa will be feeling confident they'll be in Europe. Remember, they have that Europa League fine that guarantees them a pathway if they win that. And maybe Bournemouth will not win all their remaining games, because that's the other challenge for the two of them. If a team that is pursuing them then goes on and wins their final games, then they could drop out. But it's very difficult, because Liverpool, by this weekend, needed 4 points to make it to Europe, added 1. They could still add that. They could still add the remaining thing, because they have 2 games to go. You have to play Villa, and then you have to play Brentford on the final day. The final day, which for me will be about Mohamed Salah, the big send-off for one of Premier League's best players of the past 30 years or so. That's going to be the storyline. But on the pitch, these teams are just stumbling over the line. There is going to be a lot of work that can be done in the summer to improve for the next season.
Okay, another club to the La Liga now that is stumbling over the line is Real Madrid. But can we talk about Barcelona? You know, what a win at the Camp Nou. And Rashford again. Oh, we have been talking about him the last couple of editions of Second Take with IDK. What a goal.
Yeah, beautiful. A free kick that you felt from that angle is going to play, because you think about a right footer, is going to play it into the box. There hasn't been so many who take it, who choose to go for goal from that angle. We saw Enzo Fernandez went for it from a similar one. I also remember famously one that has never left my mind, David Villa for Valencia against Chelsea. I think back in 2007 at Stamford Bridge, goes for it right from that angle. And Petr Cech, the Chelsea goalkeeper, had set up and was very certain a right footer could not play the ball there. But David Villa went for it. So Marcus Rashford, beautiful goal, and eventually they got another from Fermin Lopez to beat Real Madrid by 2-0 and win the La Liga, which is their second successive title, and to ensure that Real Madrid finish another season trophyless, because they also did not do well in Europe, knocked out, and they have been barely competitive in the Spanish La Liga. So a huge result. Now there's things that I want to mention. One, you cited with the Marcus Rashford. I think the decision about his future is going to come down to money. For Barcelona, they do not have the resources. And they need to invest in a striker, because when you have a 37-year-old as your main striker in Robert Lewandowski, you need to invest in that position. So they cannot be spending too much on Rashford, who is not part of the spine of the team. And I'll always use the word spine because, first of all, he comes on huge wages. Yeah? He earns a lot of money from his loan deal because United and Barcelona are sharing the wage bill. And he earns a lot, so he has to cut down on that. And then United too have to cut down on the asking price in terms of a sale. I reported about 25 million pounds or million euros.
Michael Carrick wouldn't want him back.
I was going to get to that. Okay. So they have to cut down on the price if they want to sell to Barcelona, because remember, they have to invest in the number 9. Even if they choose to extend Lewandowski's contract, they need to buy someone who plays in that position. So you cannot be spending too much money on a player, though good, though decent, is not a spine player. Then the other one is the one you cite. Who is the United manager? You say you said Michael Carrick, but none of us is certain that Michael Carrick is going to retain the job. So then what happens at United? Does Carrick, if he retains the job, does he want Rashford back? Is it out of sentiment that is a United born and bred since the age of 8? Is he out of a product that he's going to deliver to the team? Does he come back and revive some of the football that we saw Rashford play in his late teens and early 20s? Do United believe that when they sign him, when they bring him back and next season, does he have a chance of getting back to that level? Because clearly part of the reason why he left the club is that the performances had dropped, but also there was a bit of the discipline.
Yes.
The team has lost a game, and then his picture emerging from a bar somewhere, and sometimes was even accused of not putting in enough effort. And that's why he went to that interview with Henry Winter. With Henry Winter, one of the best journalists in the UK. Brilliant guy. He's a gem of a writer. When you read his stuff, you know, he's writing, the language that he uses to relay his messages are brilliant. When he was accused of not putting in effort, he goes to Henry Winter and says he was putting in effort. And he says no one understands how he feels about United. But it's not enough to be a fan. And to be a fan and play for the team you support is a privilege. And there are very few footballers in the world who have had that privilege. Rashford is one of them. The other I can relate to is Steven Gerrard. To play for a club where you're a fan, almost, you are an ultra, or you could almost throw a stone for that club, that's a privilege. So it's a very delicate situation, I think, for Marcus Rashford. But I think the right move, he's hit double figures for Barcelona in his first season there. If he trims his wages and probably negotiates, Barcelona and him negotiate with United, and they cut on the transfer fee, I think would be a very good move for him if he stays at Barcelona. For me, that would work for him better than trying to go and impress whoever United hand the job, whether it's Carrick or someone else is coming in. That would be a very tough task. The other thing I want to mention, Mebo, is this Barcelona side has won 2 league titles and a very experienced manager, Hansi Flick, who actually lost his father on the day of the game, and he was being celebrated on that day. First of all, he's proven as a coach. Won 2 titles at Bayern in the league, and he's won 2 at Barcelona. Brilliant coach. But this is a very young team. It's actually, for me, when they were knocked out of the Champions League by Atletico Madrid, that night, their average age was 22. So they've won, and they're not even playing at the peak of their powers. We've seen Pedri and Gavi have had injury problems. You have Casado, you have Kubasi, you have Alejandro Balde, you have Lamine Yamal, who is the star of the side and is what, 19 now or 18, whatever the age. You have Eric Garcia. So many young players. they are not even playing at the peak of their powers. So sometimes we imagine if a growth curve in football development goes in the direction that it should go, it's a very scary prospect. And now Barcelona's situation that has reduced them to having all these young players that they've had around and also signed some free agents over a period of time was forced on them by the financial situation. Remember, when they brought in Xavi Hernandez, they had no money to sign players. So Xavi had no solution but to bring in some of his young players from the La Masia and an opportunity. Many of them have gone on and proved themselves, the Gavis, the Pedris, they've proved themselves as legit A-class players at the top level in football. Now their finances have even improved. Yes, not yet at the level they were before the crisis they've been in, but Joan Laporta, now the president of the club, who returned for a second spell, has improved the finances. They have a very good contract with Spotify Camp Nou, with Spotify that makes the stadium Camp Nou. They've brought in some sponsorships, and the financial situation is not as bad as it used to be because previously they were in a bit of an abyss. So to imagine that they have a very young core of players who are 22 and under, and their finances can improve, and then they can go and bring in maybe a superstar to help with all these, but maybe they don't need a superstar because then the club is going to be built around Yamal the same way they had Messi and had to get rid of Eto'o and Ronaldinho because they had to protect this young boy and ensure that no one else is in their space. Maybe they don't need to buy a superstar, but there are areas of a team where you think they're short. I've talked about the number 9. Yes, Fermin Lopez scored, but I don't think it's a long-term solution in that area where Lewandowski plays. Even if he retained Rashford, he does not fancy himself in that position as a number 9. Maybe they need to buy a better centre-back. They don't need to be moving around Eric Garcia in every position where they are short centre-back, left-back, right-back, in midfield. Maybe they need to buy a centre-back to help with the development of the other guys in defence. But a very scary prospect for me. You keep Hansi Flick in that job for another 2-3 years. These players continue to develop, and then you fix a few of the holes in the team, maybe 1 or 2 other players, and you're looking at another long period of dominance and another period of tears for Real Madrid because theirs is another crisis.
Yeah,
they have another crisis. The other week they had players fighting, Tchouameni and Valverde, at training. Then the club releases a statement admitting that there was a fight at training. Then Valverde goes to Instagram and posts a lie, a total lie, where he said he hit his head on the table, yet was punched by Tchouameni clearly. Now, we've seen with the coaches, they've had to change coaches this season. They've been in a bit of a crisis. Then there's accusations against Kylian Mbappe, their superstar, for taking his wife on vacation during the season when the club is losing because they were seen on a yacht when he was out injured. So then you have the egos that have always been discussed, Vinicius, Mbappe, and the manner in which Alonso was eased out of the squad, out of a team, and sacked after being given the job a few months earlier. The crisis around Alonso, the squad is split. There are players who backed him, and Mbappe is reported to be one of those who backed Alonso. And then there is the Vinicius camp that did not think Alonso was handling the superstars the way he should have. So how they sort this out and who they even bring in to coach, because Arbeloa is not going to retain the job. Yeah, he's going to be asked to leave. Maybe stays as an assistant or goes and finds greener pastures elsewhere. Who comes in? Talk is about Jose Mourinho. In my words, Mourinho Yamala. One of the greatest managers of the past 25 years, but his better days are behind him.
So you live when you're still loved.
Yeah, his better days are behind him. So when they bring in Mourinho,
he can't do anything special.
Maybe when we know when an elephant is thinning, it does not become the size of a cat. An elephant can thin and become a cow, a bull. So Mourinho may not become as thin as a cat. But even for all his attributes, I don't think he still has that magic wand. Yeah? Because sometimes the things he does are no longer valid for today's footballer. When you criticize these players openly, they take it in a wrong way. Yeah? His era would do that and players would respond to it. They do not. When you split the squad and say, these are my untouchables, when he did that at Chelsea and named the 9 players at the press conference, Carvalho, Terry, Michel Ballack, Drogba, Lampard, Ashley Cole, and say these are untouchables, players don't take that lightly these days. Yeah, when you try to diminish their role in the team. So, and there are so many other things, and also the game has left him. When you're going to play ultra defensive football today, you're very likely not to survive. We've seen with Diego Simeone and Atletico Madrid why they were knocked out by Arsenal, that they have no response when they have to play on the front foot. Yeah, because today's teams, most of them, have periods where they have to be on top and capitalize on those chances. Now, Mourinho does not have a plan B beyond numbers behind the ball, hack a man, close down spaces, and then wait for a corner kick. That does not work anymore. So I'm not convinced that he's the right man for the job. But he has so many apologists and so many fans of his, and I was one of his fans 20 years ago. So but I'm also very good at knowing when to let go. When I fall out of love, I know that I was once in love. It doesn't mean I wasn't once in love. I was, but I fell out of love because I also realized Mourinho is not as beautiful as he used to be. The attraction that brought us to him is long gone, but we are holding on to something that he no longer has.
You mentioned here on the show that Zinedine Zidane is going to take over France after the World Cup. Can he be coerced to return to Madrid? And does he have anything? Would he have anything to offer?
I think he would. I think if he was coerced by Florentino Perez, Perez is a very difficult man to turn down.
Makes you an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah, it makes you the kind of offer, and we've seen, not only for Zidane, but at the time when he signed Figo from Barcelona, it was unthinkable to sign one of Barcelona's best players and join Real Madrid. So it's very difficult to turn down. I think they would take the gamble. If Madrid and the board, they would take the gamble on Zinedine Zidane. He hasn't done too badly. Yeah, the times when he was at Madrid, I think he managed the Spurs.
With the
he did very
League.
well. No, we are very conservative with the language. I'm a bit like an accountant. You always look at the bottom line and ensure. That's why.
Has anyone done what?
When you invest 1,000 shillings and report that you made 1,100, the accountant will report the 100 as supernormal profits. Yeah, you know how they are very extravagant with language. So I was being very economic with the language, but he did very well at Real Madrid, won the Champions League and did all these things. I think they should take a gamble on him and ask him to return. He would be in Madrid is a very enticing prospect. Even for some of us who felt, for example, Alonso should not have gone there. It was too early in his career because it was inevitable he was going to get sacked. And this is a very good coach. We've seen with the work he did with Bayer Leverkusen. They went through an entire season unbeaten. That's never easy to do anywhere in the world. So Zidane has had the taste. And we've seen his ability to manage the stars. Yeah, when he was managing the Ronaldos and Benzema, found a balance and did not affect the team when he was there. Because that's what Madrid need. You need to manage, for me, 3 big characters in that team that you need to manage. One, Mbappe. The second, Vinicius. The third is Jude Bellingham. If you manage those 3 and put them on side to work for the same goal every single day, then the team is going to be in a good position. Because there are people who are big characters, the kind like Antonio Rudiger. I think he's a very big character in the dressing room. But his is about trying to help the team win. The others will get along with anyone, yeah, in the team. And now we've seen from the past week that Tchouaméni can throw a punch, yeah. So maybe you need to walk in with a bit of chains, but chains for his hands, but not his feet, to ensure that Tchouaméni and all these other guys, Valverde, who has been brilliant for Madrid over the so many years he's been at the club, you need to channel their energies into the right cause, because that's sometimes that lacks with Real Madrid. These are players with talent, and any coach who can do that for them is welcome, and I think Zidane would.
Okay. A team that is sitting pretty here in Uganda, the Premier League, is Vipers. They have a 5-point lead at the top. Do you think they will squander it with the games left? They have been very consistent, fairly consistent this season.
They've made a very huge effort in trying to squander their lead at the top. They've actually made an effort to ensure that we have a title race. I think Vipers.
They should have won it long time.
They should have won the league long time ago.
Yeah, some
but somehow they are trying to make it interesting. With 3 games to go, they just 5 points between them and KCCA. This should have been long sewn up because of how poor KCCA have been And remember that game that KCC played in Midigo, in Yumbe, against Calvar and lost by a goal to nil. A game that is discussed for Herbert Achai and his wedding on the same day. And is the vice captain of the club. And of course, the captain of the club, by the Philbert Obenchan, was the best man at the wedding. But luckily for Benchan, he was suspended for that game. So Vipers have really made an effort to make it interesting by drawing too many games over the past few weeks. The latest being their draw with URA. And then KCC won their game against Maroons by 3-0. So we go into another week where if KCC, for example, were to beat UPDF, their game is in Bombo, and then Vipers win their game away at Police, then it remains 5 points. Then Kitara play Express. Yeah, Kitara are third with 54 points, 60, 55, and then 54. If Kitara were to win theirs, then it also remains 6 points. Vipers are really, I insist, are making an effort to make it interesting, even when it hasn't. So
I'm always go against them.
So when I read, I always spend a bit of time reading a lot of Ugandan websites. I have an affinity for Nalubale, I have an affinity for Kawowo, for Swift Sports, for a few others, and lately there is one I think called Sportslight, and of course my favorite, Sports Nation Uganda. Brand Kawalia created a website and sold it and created another one with the same title. Brilliant chap, brilliant chap. So I have an affinity for those. And of course, where I edit, Daily Monitor, I see Dennis Boss and Elvis Senono, who write for me the Uganda Premier League stories the entire season. They've made an effort for every week to say title race, Vipers not pulling away, KCC back in title race. And every time I'm reading, Kitara too, not going away, Kitara not going away in title race. And every time I'm reading that, I'm always thinking, these guys are trying too hard. But if the writers are trying too hard, Vipers are helping them write the script. Because Vipers are also trying too hard to ensure that we have a title race. I've felt for long there is none. There is none. Because Vipers have had the tools and the other teams have not shown enough to suggest that they will be right in the conversation. But here we are. It's 5 points and it's 3 games to play. If Vipers were to draw points against Police, and it's not an easy game, going to that Kira Police Arena, right, not far from Kamocha. If Police do something and KCC were to win away at UPDF in Bombo, who knows? We're going the final 2 games of the season and it's a 3-point lead. The final 2 games are a 3-point lead, so it's not yet done. So all the guys who are writing these headlines, please keep that title race in the headline. I'm intrigued by the fact that Vipers are trying not to win the league.
Let's talk about the Queen Cranes and Ghana. What happened?
I think game management. We gave them a lot of flowers for picking that, for losing in Accra by 2-1, because we felt they have an opportunity when they come home and then they take the lead. And then thereafter, Cheryl Bottes, the coach, and his team have nothing more to her team. I apologize again, because that's the second time I've said that. And she's in her 60s, so I don't think she'd be as offended as Mabel.
No. She looks great.
She looks great. She looks great, yeah. She looks great. She's taken good care of herself. But that's a good thing, I think, about being sport. And the other trick you said, drinking water. Yeah, more water. So, very disappointing result in the end, because they took the lead and the game was 2-2 on aggregate for a very long period of time. Then they conceded a goal. And then thereafter, I think the goal came in the 78th minute. And the mobilization to play 2.4 for Kadiba Stadium had been good. There are several people who had showed up for the game. Then they conceded an equalizer and they have no response to that. And Ghana through. But it's also a reminder about the margins. There is something that teams that have done things that we haven't done are good at. I'd actually understated the numbers on our previous show that Ghana have been to 6 under 20 Women's World Cups. They've actually qualified for an 8th successive. They'd actually qualified for 7 by the time we spoke last week. Now they've qualified for an 8th successive World Cup. Wow. So if we have dreams, and sometimes when you lose to a team that has done certain things that you haven't achieved, you have to almost ask yourself, how do I close this margin? Because what you can sense now is that the margins between Uganda and Ghana are small. But what we might call a small margin could actually be very big for a team that has qualified on 8 occasions. Yeah? Because the players are changing for the Black Princesses, like they are called, but they are still delivering the same result with different generations. 8 successive under 20 World Cups is something
to
take note of when we've not even qualified for our first. So, yeah, disappointing result, but in the end, if you're going to lose, maybe lose to Ghana. Yeah, would have been very disappointing if we had lost maybe to a team like Namibia. Of course, that would be very low. Or Zambia. We are getting much closer, but we know what to do to eventually knock off that gap. Because there's many sports where we get close, but we don't know what to do to knock that final hurdle and ensure that we are the ones and not Ghana.
Well, maybe something that is definitely a step in the right direction are the USSSA games that are happening in Lira. 64 schools are taking part?
Yeah, as many as 64.
So
the
we
team
can
to
get some cream from there to push to our under-20s?
That would be for the boys, because it's a boys' championship. It's a boys' championship. Remember the other week, USSA these days has a lot of money. They've come from a 0 budget to over 7 billion allocated by Parliament. Of course, they went and presented their case to the Minister of Education and Sports. So the previous week they've been having the USSA Ball Games 1. Those include games like badminton, like table tennis, like hockey, like rugby, where GSS were the winners. Yeah, they played at Seroma Christian High School and played at Namilyango and Seta High. Those were the joint hosts, but the main events were held at Seroma. So after that, schools now are off to Lira for the USSA, that's the Uganda Secondary School Sports Association, USA Football Championship, which in my era we knew as a Coca-Cola. That was the title, yes, because Coca-Cola sponsored this tournament from around 1993 to about 2018 or 19, when the partnership broke up. And this is a championship, actually, if you go back to schools football, per se, it was actually started by UTV, yeah, back in the 1980s. It started at UTV Kampala Schools Championship. Chibuli, Kololo, Lubiri SS and all were the pioneers, and Chibuli won several titles in that era. Then eventually mutated when Coca-Cola came in as Coca-Cola. Now Uganda Secondary School Sports Association has grown enough to create their own company that has a CEO in Chris Mugisha that runs this championship. So schools are in Lira, and of course most of the attention will be reserved for Chitende, who have won multiple titles. Of course Chibuli are never too far away in terms of the schools you should be focusing on. But there's been Johnny Come lately over the past 10 or 15 years. Budo SS who are the champions from last year. And of course, those two schools from the Teso sub-region. Amos College School, owned by Mr. Patrick Isiagi, and Bukedea Comprehensive School, owned by the Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Anita Annette Among Magogo, is one of the other schools. But I've also seen from some of my people who cover this tournament diligently, and one of those I have a lot of respect for is George Katongole. And he has told me that there's teams here that are going to be missing several players because those players have been selected for the under-20 national team that we are also going to be talking about. The under-20 national team is in Morocco for the 2026 under-20 Africa Cup, or rather under-17, my apologies, under-17 Africa Cup of Nations. Okay, these days we have too many teams. Sometimes you need to to have two tongues to keep up. I know which one is playing, but the under-17 team is in Morocco for the AFCON. So there are teams that are missing several players, and George has told me that could be a factor in who eventually emerges as champion of this. And USSSA, I think, should be one of those that have suffered for this because some of their players are away. So the people in Lira will enjoy a very, very good championship. I've seen, I think the concentration is at Lango College and Dr. Milton Obote College. Yeah, that's where the concentration of the championship will be. So a lot of football, and whenever school football is played, there's a lot of enjoyment around. It's a festival for me. It's an entire festival.
Yeah, I was seeing the police there promising lots of security, you know, during the day and even at night, I think, hoping that people don't sabotage one another. But back to the under-17s, how far can Uganda go?
Should be a very interesting story that we should follow, because many of us have not forgotten the events of last year. One of the best stories I think most of us enjoyed was the Uganda Cubs when they played at the World Cup in Qatar, especially that victory over France. Remember the goal by James Bogere?
Yes.
That was one of the highlights of that tournament. So that generation of players is gone. Now there is a new generation. While there are players from last year's team that are still part of this, there's Luchamzi, there's Adrian Mukwanga, the goalkeeper, who are part of that team last year, who are still here. Most of the players in this setup are new. The coach is new because last year it was Brian Senyondo. Now it's Lira Kingston, the Ghanaian who is in charge of the under-17 national side, and is also in charge of all the other junior teams.
It's good we got a Ghanaian.
Yeah.
After talking about the ladies.
Because of, is quite exposed. He lived in Europe, and one of the things we want to do, that FIFA want to do, is to get these players onto a platform where they compete with the best players in the world consistently, and then thereafter, the conveyor belt we are hoping for is that they end up in Europe, like we've seen with James Bogere and Hamza Sengoba from that team are in Denmark, and actually their Danish side won the Danish Superliga this previous weekend, which is their first title in 40 years for their club. So they'll be playing in the Champions League qualifiers, and hopefully if they do well, they get to the group stages and we get a chance to see them. Yet they are still development players, so wherever they get there will be very good. So another generation of under-17 players are in Morocco, where they will be playing in a group that has DRC, Cameroon, and Ivory Coast. All these have more illustrious CVs than we do in football, but maybe at a youth level, you can't compete with them. Because for us, I think one of our challenges normally is at this level, under-17, under-20, we are right at the same level. I think the challenge for Lira Kingston and the people managing the game at FIFA, and these days they have an entire office on development headed by Bashir Mutiaba, is that the transition after this level. We've seen players, the Saddam Jumas, and many generations of Ugandan players. They've competed and won the Gothia and Tivoli Cup 20, 30 years ago against players like Iniesta. But then the transition that we make from this level to the next is what lets us down. So the bare minimum for Lira Kingston first is to finish in the top 10 at the AFCON, who will then qualify for the World Cup. The World Cup will again be in Qatar. Then thereafter, how much can these players develop that they become reference points for the next generation of players? I think that is the task. I'm quite optimistic, and I've seen in an interview done by our colleague Fred Muambo in the Daily Monitor, Lira Kingston actually says that this crop of players is better than the one that played at the World Cup last year. And in addition, he also has a backing from his assistants, Saddam Juma and Stephen Bengo, some of the best players Uganda has produced in the past 25 years or so, but did not fulfill their potential. Some of us who watched them come through at a young age in their teenage years thought Uganda had found diamond. In the end, we could only settle for silver. Their careers, the way they panned out, I think they could have done much more. And actually, Juma and Bengo also insist that this group of players is better than the one we had at the World Cup last year. And that will be proven on the pitch starting on May 13th in Morocco.
Let's talk about rugby.
We are done with the regular season of the league, now into the playoffs, because remember, the way the league in Uganda is structured with the rugby is that you play one game over 11 weeks and then the top 8 advance to a playoff. So the top 8 is known. And predictably, the top 8, the number 1 team is the Stanbic Bank Pirates. Black Pirates, rather, Stanbic Black Pirates, who finished as number 1. The champions have played very well this season. They're even into the Enterprise Cup, the Regional Enterprise Cup, the final, which will be on May 30th in Nairobi. But it's Cobs who are second. I just want to read the table the way it is, because that also determines who plays who in the quarterfinals, then in the semis, then you go on until the final. So Pirates, for whom Alex Aturinda and some of that group of players, mention William Munkore, mention Thomas Chisiga, who was also named MVP, have been brilliant this season. Actually, Chisiga was named MVP for 2025. So it's Pirates 1, Cobs 2, Toyota Buffaloes 3, Platinum Credit Heathens 4, Victoria Sharks 5, plus Conmongers 6, Impi 7, and Walukuba Barbarians 8. So it's Pirates against Barbarians in the quarterfinals, Cobs against Impis, Buffaloes against Mongers, and then Heathens against the Sharks. Then thereafter there will be semi-finals and then finals. And at this stage, the quarterfinals are home and away. The semi-finals too are home and away. Then the final will be hosted by the team that finished with a higher rank during the regular season. So let's say the final has Pirates playing against, let's say, Cobs or Buffaloes. Pirates would then host the final. But if Cobs were playing in the final against Buffaloes, Cobs would then host, because they finished higher in the regular season. So that's it for the regular season. So really excited about the playoffs, because this is when a potential semi-final between Pirates and Heathens. Remember, Heathens did beat Pirates at Chadondo during the regular season. Then perhaps a potential final, or you could say, between Cobs and Pirates, depending on Cobs and Heathens, depending on how they sort out their quarterfinals and then semi-finals over the next few weeks.
Okay. Over the weekend, did you go to Mbara?
No, I actually didn't. In the end, my life sometimes sucks. Yeah.
Responsibility.
Not necessarily responsibility, but I had crises that I had to manage. But I also lost a lot of data for the times I wasn't on my desk watching the rally. Yeah, the Shelby Power Pearl of Africa Uganda rally. I was lucky that for so many of the hours, I had the luxury of being on the Daily Monitor desk, and that allowed me to watch using the company data. Yeah, so I spend most of the time on YouTube with Harper Sport. I think that is the YouTube channel where I was watching the rally. But when I was off the desk, then I had to switch to my phone and spend my 1 KB on trying to catch
But
the
it was worth it.
Yeah, worth it. In the end, Karan Patel and Tausif Khan,
A treble.
finished first, winning this for the 3rd time, beating a fellow Kenyan crew of Saman Vohra and Rustaro, who finished 2nd. In the end, the best placed Ugandan was Yasin Nasser and Ali Katumba. Their crew, who are the reigning African champions, finished 3rd. And then you go down and down. But there's a very interesting story that I had not noticed while watching the event in real time. There's a Tanzanian driver that people had been discussing a lot, Ahmed Huel. Yeah, and when we interviewed Reynolds Chibira, he was actually the guy coming through the border, Mutukula, with a big crew, and had to get all these URA clearances for his crew and all, and his service, and came, I think the car came with a carrier. He drove about 4 or 5 cars from Tanzania to come for the event. Now, the car developed issues, and he had differences, I think, with the management of the rally, and left during the rally and drove back to Tanzania.
What differences could those be?
I don't even understand. When I saw in the story that he disagreed with his crew and with the management of the rally and walked out during the rally and left and actually decided to drive from Ombarara towards Mutukula. It was a very curious decision, because I would imagine for someone, let me give you just a basic. If you're doing the National Rally Championship in Uganda, the national event, you're likely to spend close to 13 to 15 million shillings per rally. I'm talking about the top drivers who win. Yeah, the Sebuguzis and all. That's why the sponsorship is very important. For a Ugandan to compete very well in the Pearl of Africa Uganda Rally, because of the rules and the Africa Rally Championship rules that come from the FIA, you're going to spend anywhere above 40 million shillings for that. I would imagine for someone coming outside of Uganda to compete here, Karan Patel, Saman Vohra, Ravi Chana, Yasprit Singh, all these drivers, the illustrious ones that we've seen over the years, Mohamed Essa, Mona Singh Jr., Conrad Rattenbach, all of them, they are spending anywhere close to 200 million shillings to come and compete in something where they are not going to win anything, and they could actually emerge from the event poorer because the car could break down, and then you have to fly it back to your mechanics and then mend it and then go for the next event. So it was a bit curious that if you're spending that money to come from Tanzania and compete, then walk away when the rally is not done, sounds very odd for me. Sounds very odd.
Yeah.
Because rallies are not cheap.
They're not cheap.
Not cheap at all.
But you said he also disagreed with members of his own team,
just
the organizers.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the NBA playoffs. I don't know if we can start with the OKC defense, but there's a fierce battle now, a new battle. Anthony Edwards versus Wemby. And I've heard some people say that they think the refs favor Wembenyama. Have you seen,
if they did, then he wouldn't have been ejected from their game 4, which the Timberwolves won. Wembenyama called for a flagrant foul too, because he swung an elbow towards Nazir Reed and was eventually booted from the game and did not finish that. So I don't buy that. I've actually seen, for example, what's his name, JJ Redick, the coach at the LA Lakers, accusing the league of not protecting its stars. And he actually argues that he's not seen a star who has not been protected as much as LeBron James. So everyone has their issues with refs, and Austin Reeves has also gone after the refs. And actually, after Lakers lost their, I think that was their second game, because they are trailing 3-0 as we shoot this. They are trailing 3-0 and could be swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference semifinals. They even held a mini conference on the court with the referees upon the final whistle. They all walked in and went and gave the refs quite a mouthful of the things they felt that had not gone right. I don't buy that. And the one thing I think with big men, and I want to go back to Victor Wembanyama, I wanted to bring that context to show that not only one party is aggrieved. One, the Minnesota Timberwolves are playing some of the best defense. And over the past few years, maybe something we have learned, because I'm one of those who has written them off before. They tend to flip a switch for the playoffs. They are playing much better, I could say 5 times better than they were in the regular season when they finished 6th. Defensively, they are going physical on Wembenyama, and eventually got to his head and irritated him. And that's how he was eventually ejected for that elbow, Nazir Reed. But they are going hard on him. And when you're big, you just have to pay them in the same currency. And he should do that. And he hasn't done that yet. That's why his team is now tied 2-2 with the Timberwolves after that victory for the Timberwolves, where Anthony Edwards scored 36 points. And remember, he's only come back from an injury, from that hyperextended knee that left him out of some of the games in that series against the Denver Nuggets. But they won the latest 114-109. The Spurs competed without Wembenyama. So it's 2-2 as the series now moves back to San Antonio. Hopefully, then there's another close game and another one, and we get to Game 7. the two most important words in American sports are Game 7. That's one series. Also in the West, like I mentioned, the Lakers could be swept by the OKC, and the OKC have not lost a game in this postseason. They are 7-0. If they win Game 4, then they are 8-0. But most of it is not actually from what we thought would decide the series. It's not Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who has decided the series. He's scoring in the low 20s. They had, I think, a 20-point game and a 22-point game and 23-point game, but it's the bench. AJ Mitchell is jumping off that bench and giving Lakers all the kind of problems on offense. In the last game, he scored 24, but like you mentioned, also their defense. That swarming defense that you're going to work for every shot. They are going to go after your main scorers, your creators, and sometimes they push the envelope quite a bit because they are on the brink of committing fouls. But sometimes when you earn a reputation, the NBA allows a bit of room. It's a bit elastic on what they allow you to do. A bit like for many of us who watched the Detroit Pistons in the early 2000s, that team of the Rasheed Wallaces and Chauncey Billups and all, I think they really pushed the limit of what the rules could allow or not allow, because what we call a silly defense, sometimes what might be physical might be fouling. And the OKC are the latest team, I think, to push that string. And the NBA is allowing it, so they could be in the finals. In the Eastern Conference, we have one of the series decided. The New York Knicks are into the finals after beating the Philadelphia 76ers 4-0. But the latest game was a 30-point piece in terms of a margin, because the New York Knicks scored 144 points, which is a franchise record, and sank as many as 22 threes, 18 of them, I think, by halftime, which is an NBA record. And the Philadelphia 76ers could not keep up. While Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey tried, they were just not in the game at all. They were not given a chance to compete at all. So the New York Knicks and Jalen Brunson are through to the conference finals. Again, where they'll be waiting for the winner between the Detroit Pistons and the Cleveland Cavaliers. That series is now 2-1 because the Cavaliers won Game 3. So it's 2-1. You think the number one seed, the Pistons, for me, have shown enough defensively. They should be able to knock out Donovan Mitchell and James Harden to advance to that final against the New York Knicks. But during commentary, I had a very interesting story that when they tell you about the favors that God can do for you. So, New York Knicks' best player is Jalen Brunson. His father was an NBA player. So when Jalen Brunson was 10, his father received a phone call when they are driving back. His father was a steely defender. He was a guard like him. And the person on the other side was a general manager, I think of Philly, whatever team his father was playing for. And he was being cut. He was being told, you're being cut. You're being cut off a team. You have no contract. You have no job. And he started crying. And the young Jalen Brunson, who was 10 years old, I listened to the story when Mike Breen was relaying it during commentary. And I said, wow, this is very beautiful. So he started to cry, and his 10-year-old son also cried. Because at 10, I think a child can understand the pain you're going through. If you come home and show them that you're not in a good position, children understand at that stage. A 5-year-old will not. So they both cried. Now, the father, the long and short is that Jalen Brunson's dad works around the NBA developing players. So his son, who was 10, had started playing the game. So he's put so much work into the son getting into the NBA that the son is one of the best players now and cannot be cut. Yeah, it was. So when I listened to the story, I was like, wow. That's why sometimes when I'm watching sport, I always tell people who watch sport in bars or in noise that they don't know what they are missing. The best stories are told in commentary. In commentary. Not what you read, not what you would imagine, not what you'll watch in a video. But during commentary, those guys are telling. There's even another about, what's the name of a guy? Michael Cheese. Yeah, Michael Cheese, I think, he's worked in the NBA for 48 years as a player and now as an assistant coach at the New York Knicks. And they told a story about his life. Like, I watch a lot of sport and understand a lot of things about sport. But sometimes I listen to these stories and they are not X and O, and I'm interested in the X and O. For me, the X and O is what happens inside the 4 lines. Why are you winning? Why are you losing? Why are you defending this way? Why are you taking the shot this way? But some of these additives are what makes sport more beautiful than many things.
Well, you said the favor of God, so hopefully it continues. And it
With
just...
Branson and the Knicks. One of the most popular teams. One of the teams, many years ago I had a story. The New York Knicks have a pay-per-view channel. They've not been to an NBA final in over 40 years. Should be 43 or 53. If I remember the number, because it should be 53. Because the Philly have not won a title since 1982. Yeah. Knicks maybe have not won since 1953. So on their channel, they start the season with 8 million subscribers without a chance of winning the NBA. That's how popular this team is. Now, when you have 8 million subscribers, that you can compare.
But New York also one of the most popular states.
Most popular states or cities, but also basketball is a culture. Yeah, that's why their Madison Square Garden is called the Mecca. It can be offensive if you're Muslim. It's a Mecca of basketball. So it's
Mecca, MECCA.
Yeah.
I thought
the Mecca.
M-A-K-E-R.
No, the Mecca of basketball. But they have not won in 53 years. If they went on and won a championship, what a story. But no, they won't. OKC will win. OKC is too good to imagine that they would lose if they get to the final. If they let OKC get to the final, it's very difficult to imagine they won't win.
They won't win. Okay. So why should we take note of girls cricket in Gulu? Skyview?
Yeah. By the way, guys, the chairs we use here are owned by Cricket Uganda. So it's only fair that we mention that they've been having a tournament, which is the Girls Schools Cricket Week, wrapped up in the previous week in Gulu. These days, all tournaments are happening in Gulu, especially for the cricket because they've been there before. I think last year too. If they are not in Gulu, they are in Soroti. Okay, in my years there was only Boys Schools Cricket Week, which always happened here at Lugogo. The first time men of us saw Kenneth Kamioka, arguably the best cricketer. Unluckily came before video and anything, but quite a character. The cricket and then the man. An amazing guy. In the days when players hit a six and got 5,000 shillings, yeah, or you had to buy them a soda. By then we didn't even know soda was bad for sport. That's the era I'm talking about. But these days the game has been spread a bit more. They have schools playing in Kasese, in Masaka, in Imbarara, in Gulu, in Soroti, in all these places across the country, and they have development officers there. So they bring all those girls and have a girls' schools cricket week. And normally when these tournaments happen, I'm always looking out for schools from the Teso sub-region, because there's been the Soroti Cricket Academy who have done a very good job. And you're always looking at where is Olila High School? Will they go on and win the tournament? In the end, Olila got to the final but lost to a school I think it's called Light Secondary School that eventually won the schools cricket week this year. And some interesting schools there, Sacred Heart. Yeah, you notice sometimes when you're looking out for these, you want to look out for Gayaza, because Gayaza used to be a pioneer, and most of the first girls we saw play cricket in Uganda were from Gayaza, and eventually some from Makerere College. But the times have changed. The times have changed significantly. These days depends on the headmaster of that school. That's why I'm told these days, okay, Budo have a headmaster who loves cricket. I've seen Makerere College too now trying to play again, yeah. But in the end, Light Secondary School win the tournament, and we hope to use some of the names of the girls in these tournaments as reference points for years to come when they eventually make the step up. Because our friends who we always interact with here at Lugogo, Deus Muhumus and Brand Masaba, have really put in a bit of work to expand the pool of girls who are playing cricket. Those two I mentioned are coaches for the Victoria Pearls, and they are really making an effort to ensure that there's a bigger pool of girls playing. So when there's more schools in Gulu playing that schools cricket week, then you hope as many of them will stay in the game, and then they could be useful for the national team, and even just to expand and change the perception about sport and girls being involved in sport.
And I think that's a very good point to end. We started by talking about women and football and the burden that some of the UPL clubs will have. But hey, if it's not football, it can be cricket where women can shine. And I don't know if you have any updates for us from rugby. and the Black Pearls.
The team is not going to play again. They chose to walk
Chama.
away. Yeah, Helen Butema and Cruz say they're
So
not going to
sad.
play again.
No
so
update. So
nothing. They are not going to be playing this year. And then next year we have to wait. Next season we have to wait and see.
where are the
But-
sponsors? Please come on board. You know, and
And there's a gentleman you started with, Crispus, who mentions, who talks about teams not being able. Yes, we can say that forever. But I've always asked the question, how then are we going to start to play or support women's sport? How? Yes, we've been here for years and it hasn't happened. Even at the top, teams like Manchester United are not even 10 years old. Manchester United women.
yeah.
Yeah? So how then are we going to do it? CAF forced it on us by saying every team that goes to the continent should have an affiliate. Now FIFA are moving a step ahead and saying every team should have a women's team. Yes, the cost is very high. But is that all? How then, what's the magic bullet? Because I've always asked, what then has to happen? Do we say women should not play sport? Or are we saying they should? I'd rather listen to you when you say they shouldn't play at all. But if you're saying they should, and then you're saying because of course we shouldn't have women's teams, no, that I don't buy.
Send us messages on this. We have seen quite a number. If you're not following us already, what are you waiting for? TikTok at Isma Sports, is it?
Isma.Dakaba Sports.
Dakaba Sports.
Yeah.
Nebo Kebirungi. We will see you next time. Remember, there's the English version of this show and there's also the Luganda version of this show with the man Blando, Brandon.
The
Chimoli.
guy Blando.
The guy Blando.
That guy Blando.
Okay, that
guy
guy Blando.
Blando.
I hope you can hear me. Seems he can't hear me, but do take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time.
Are you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Nabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.